Once upon a time there was a young prince named George. Prince George was kind-hearted and intelligent, but he was also painfully weak and timid. He does not speak to anyone else apart from his parents. He barely talks to his teachers. He failed woefully in all the physical trainings and activities his parents enrolled him into in preparation for being king, including his archery, swimming, and horse riding classes. Many of his teachers would quit out of frustration as Prince George is too weak to participate actively or even try to learn. His parents, King Ego and Queen Susan, worried deeply about his future. They fear that George's timidity and extreme weakness would make it difficult for him to lead their kingdom effectively when the time comes for him to be king. In their concern, King Egu and Queen Susan announced a grand reward for anyone who could help Prince George become brave, confident, and strong. The proclamation echoed throughout the land. Many sorcerers and herbalists stormed the kingdom with magical potions and herbs for the prince to drink in order to become strong and brave. Even some of the strongest warriors in the kingdom offered to tutor Prince George, but despite the many attempts by wise mentors and sorcerers, none succeeded in overcoming George's timidity and weakness. The king, out of desperation, summoned the greatest priest, and which the king had ever known. The witch is evil and an enemy of the kingdom, but King Ego was hoping he could strike a deal with her to heal his prince. The evil witch arrived at the palace and asked to meet with Prince George. She smiled wickedly when she saw him, and then she gave him a portion to drink. Take this, young prince, and you will become stronger than anyone that ever lived, she said. The prince was hesitant, but he wanted to become strong and make his father proud, and so he chucked down the potion. Immediately the prince transformed into a beast-like creature. His muscles grew out of his clothes, and his face changed and became scary. The evil witch laughed hysterically and disappeared, leaving behind cold shivers. The king and the queen were dumbfounded and terrified. The prince rushed over to a mirror at the wall, and when he saw his new image in the mirror, he fell on his knees and wept. Music bitterly, he ran out of the palace into the forest to hide away. King Ega sent some guards after the prince. They searched all around the forest, but they couldn't find music. As the prince wandered deeper into the forest, he met a young girl named Elizabeth who lives at the outskirts of the kingdom. Elizabeth is a maiden who works menial jobs to sustain herself and her grandmother. She's also a very brave girl and learned everything she knows from her aged and wise grandmother. She would hunt for bush animals and sell at the village market. She would harvest the produce from people's farms and gets paid for her hard work. She even gathers firewood for people. She is renowned for being industrious. While Prince George was hiding inside the cave in the forest, coincidentally, the cave happens to be where Elizabeth comes to rest after every stressful day. She came into the cave as usual and bumped into a scary-looking man. She screamed in shock and drew out a bow and arrow to shoot at the creature. Prince George fell on his knees, pleading for his life. At that point, Elizabeth realized it was a human. She moved closer to the beastly-looking man, and noticed how scared he was. How can he look this huge and beastly and still be scared like a child, she thought to herself. She put down her arrow. I will not hurt you, she said. You can sit back down. Prince George sat back down, still whimpering in fear. Elizabeth felt a strong sense of responsibility and pity for the man, and so she asked him, would you like some food and water? I could go get you some for dinner. I live really close to here. Prince George looked up at her and nodded his head in agreement. Elizabeth ran to her house and quickly prepared dinner. She also told her grandmother about the strange-looking man she encountered in the forest, and her grandmother advised her to be careful. She brought food back to the prince, and he hurriedly ate the food, so there was nothing music left. Elizabeth also brought him some old wrapper to cover himself for the night, and she promised to come back the next day to see him. The next day, Elizabeth brought some more food and drinks for the beast-looking man in the cave. He ate to his and thanked her. She realized how dangerous it was for the man to sleep out in the cold inside the cave, and so she made him an offer. Would you like to come and stay with me and my grandmother, and in return you can help us with some hard tasks around the house? Prince Joe thought about it for a while. He cannot return to the palace looking like this, and the cold at night might make him really sick if he continued to sleep inside the cave. He accepted Elizabeth's offer, and they returned to her home together. Elizabeth's grandmother was shocked to see how he looks, but she was also too kind to send him away. The following day, Elizabeth dragged the prince to go hunting with her. I am terrified of the wild, he said in a calm, shaky voice, unbefitting for his looks. You will learn if you stick to me closely, she insisted as she dragged him into the forest. She calmly taught the prince how to set traps for the animals and how to wield a bow and arrow. She also took him with her to the farms where she harvested crop for people. The prince participated, learning closely from Elizabeth. Meanwhile, King Ago and his queen were still searching for their son throughout the kingdom. They dispatched guards into the nooks and crannies of the kingdom to find out the whereabouts of their son. The king also put out a bounty for the wicked witch that transformed their son into a beast. Weeks passed and turned into months, yet no word was heard about the prince. Queen Susan became sick from worry, and the king vowed to continue to do all he can to find their son. As days passed, Elizabeth's patient guidance began to work wonders. Prince George found himself growing more and more confident, finding strength in his own voice and in his ability to make decisions. With Elizabeth's support, he faced challenges with newfound courage, going hunting by himself, drawing water from deep wells, chopping firewood for sale, harvesting farmlands with ease. And as he embodied this newfound courage, he was transforming back to his old body one day at a time. One fateful morning, Prince George woke up and realized his body has changed back almost completely. He rushed outside to show his hosts. Elizabeth and her grandmother were shocked and overjoyed to see a handsome young man instead of the beastly-looking man they had taken in. The prince embraced Elizabeth with tears in his eyes and asked her to follow him back to his house. Elizabeth and her grandmother were unaware of the fact that he is a prince, but they agreed to accompany him back to his home. When they arrived at the palace, King Agu and Queen Susan were so happy to see their son back and in good shape as they've always known him. They embraced him tightly and ordered for a banquet to be thrown in his favor. The prince introduced Elizabeth and her grandmother to his parents and told them how they took care of him. The king and queen also embraced Elizabeth and her grandmother, who were in shock at the revelation. They were taken into a beautiful room in the palace, and the palace maids beautified them in preparation for the prince's banquet. When the prince saw Elizabeth dressed in a beautiful ball gown as she made her way to the banquet table, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He fell deeply in love with her and asked her to be his wife. In the presence of his family and her grandmother, she accepted to be his queen and wife as their parents, and their guests cheered them on. The wicked witch was apprehended some days later and imprisoned in the cold underground prison in the palace, away from human interaction. Prince George and Queen Elizabeth ruled the kingdom with grace and wisdom, their love for each other a guiding force in their reign. Prince George, once weak and timid, became a beloved and courageous king, all thanks to the young maiden who believed in him. This is the end of my story.